So, yeah. So the first question that I'm going to ask is, so you've said in the past that models aren't necessarily God-given and they come from ordinary people like you and I. Could you possibly give us just a brief biography touching on sort of some of the most important experiences and milestones that may have influenced the development of the Kawa model?
Sure. And let me just preface this by saying that I have not gone through all of the questions and prepared answers for them. Um, uh, I wanted this to be as authentic as possible, and so I'm encountering these questions as they've been probably reconfigured for the first time. So what you're getting is something that's raw and not prepared. So here we go. Uh, I always mention that models, in theory, they don't just descend from heaven. They're not perfect, um, and they're models, especially in occupational therapy. We can see that they're actually made by human beings like you and me, and it's informed by the view of the world that we have acquired, um, that we have learned how to interpret and make sense of. So when I think about what has informed the Kawa model, if we see that the Kawa model was first launched in the year 2000, everything that I had experienced in my life from the time I was in my mother's womb to the year 2000 or the year 1999 is probably what has informed the views and the ideas that are in the Kawa model. I've had a number of extraordinary experiences in my life, I think, that have really had a bearing on the way that I see the world, and it has certainly informed my scholarship, but most definitely have really had an impact on the Kawa model and the development for it, and actually the need for the Kawa model to exist in the first place. Um, I mentioned early on, before everybody came on board here, that I was actually born and raised in Japan. And uh, my family in the early 1970s moved, emigrated from Japan to Vancouver on the west coast of Canada. And so that is where, Vancouver, Canada, is where I completed all of my, well, most of my tertiary education, and certainly where I studied to become an occupational therapist. So I'm going to just give you some of these kind of key moments along the way. Um, I went to study, I completed a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Physiology or Sports Sciences. Some people call it kinesiology, uh, sports sciences, and so on and so forth. But that's what I did. And I was looking forward to working with elite athletes and in terms of trying to maximize their performance. And I had the opportunity to work with the Canadian national volleyball and basketball teams, as well as for the various varsity teams at the universities that I studied at, and also some professional teams as well. Especially in hockey. Ice hockey is everything. I think it's what football is to all of you over there on the other side of the pond. But I quickly found out that elite athletes are probably some of the most egocentric people on earth. And here I was taking people with normal levels of performance, trying to reach supernormal levels of performance. And um, and I think I just realized that I wanted to work with people at subnormal levels of performance, people from all walks of life, to be able to move toward or gain some semblance of normalcy. So the progression was to go into physiotherapy. And that's what I did. I applied and got and entered a school of physiotherapy. And then I saw the light at a clinical placement. I was, doing the physiotherapy thing of counting repetitions of, in this case, leg and hip extensions for an elderly patient. And I saw across the gymnasium floor every day a couple of OTs. They were actually a husband and wife team from the United States. I was at a Canadian hospital, a rehabilitation hospital. And here they were working with a patient who had a stroke, had a CVA. And what was intriguing to me was that every day, instead of the same exercises being done, they had different kinds of kind of interesting, bizarre activities that they were taking the person through. So I got to know these two, and they were talking about occupational therapy in just ways that I had never ever heard before. And so I became so close to this couple that I moved actually to live in the basement of their home for the balance of my clinical placement. And I had found out at the time, and I didn't know the significance of this, that they had actually studied at a place in the United States called the University of Southern California. And their teachers were people like Jean Ayres, Mary Riley, Rude, and so many others that we know now as OTs. If we read a little bit of our history, we know the significance of those leaders. So here they were from there, and I remember sitting down at the dinner table and looking up and noticing this really nice carving above the lintel to the entrance into the kitchen. And I remarked, isn't that really interesting? That's a really beautiful carving. It was of a tree, kind of on a backdrop of a landscape, a lake. And they said, oh yeah, that was actually carved by one of our classmates. And he's a guy whose name is Gary Kielhoffner. So, I think that had a really big significance on my life and my ideas moving forward. And I would then, quit physiotherapy and enroll into the occupational therapy program at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And from there, I would go on to study or began to practice in the field of work occupational therapy, vocational rehabilitation. And it was there that I gained a real appreciation for the social. Occupational therapy has been so strongly influenced by medicine and by biomedicine, where we actually are concerned about problems and pathologies that we assume to be located inside of the body, embodied. And yet here I would be with my clients. I could line up 10 people with the same diagnosis of a soft tissue injury to the lumbar spine, and I would see 10 different levels of function, 10 different paces of recovery. In some cases, some people would be completely debilitated by their condition, and yet others just seem to be able to just grit their teeth, pull up their socks, and get things done. So that really intrigued me, and it really impressed upon me that even though you're able to fix the pathology, that doesn't necessarily mean that the person is well. And so I became intrigued with the environment, the social environment, and the processes within the person. That it wasn't just about injury and illness and pathology, but really about the consequences of those conditions on a person's ability to live day to day, and to live well, to move toward their potential. So I would later go on to, I was invited to go to back to my native Japan as an adult to teach occupational therapy. In fact, to establish one of the first bachelor's programs of OT in Japan. And I also returned back to graduate school at the University of British Columbia to study for a master's degree in science, rehabilitation science. And I actually had a couple of occasions to be able to live and teach in my native Japan twice in my adult life. And, this is another very significant point, and I'm getting closer and closer to how the Kawa model was actually developed. I was experiencing um, uh, uh, the phenomena of acculturating into different cultural spaces and locations. And by the way, I forgot to say that I also studied for a PhD in sociology. And it wouldn't be the first doctoral study that I did, that I embarked on, but sociology, and that was a reflection of my interest in the social. That's where the impetus to study for a sociology PhD came from. Later on, it would go on to a PhD also in medical and health anthropology. But nonetheless, here I was in Japan trying to adjust and adapt to not just my work there, but my life there. You know, my Japanese colleagues would criticize me and they would complain to me, why are you not like us? You speak your mind, you don't wait your turn. Um, you do things on your own without really considering the needs of the group or how we all are feeling about things. And, and I was experiencing that in my neighborhood as well, where I was living. So, as it dawned on me, I realized, oh my goodness, this is the reason why occupational therapists in Japan can't quite grasp occupational therapy theory. The theory and the concepts are based on experiences of daily life of the very people who've constructed these models. It's a reflection of their view of normal. And so here I was in Japan, confused. Why am I running into why am I coming into all of these, committing all of these social faux pas? And, you know, okay, now I realize why the Japanese OTs and all of my students there can't even quite grasp the meaning of occupation, the core concept of occupational therapy. They can't anchor all of the things that we say that it is about doing, being, becoming, and belonging, and so on and so forth. They can't anchor that to anything real in their experience of everyday life. So here is Japan. It's been described by social scientists as a collectivist culture. And here I am trying to abide in this culture and navigate my way through with my own acquired orientation toward individualism and autonomy and independence and all of the things that we've just regarded to be kind of normal in the Western world. So I would move back to North America, and my experience of going back and forth, it just finally dawned on me that we don't all see the world in the same way. The person who's in the box next to you on your screen doesn't see the world exactly the way that you see it. You may think that and assume that everybody does and everybody understands, your normal interpretations of the world around you, but that's not true. And I think that was yet another turning point in the steps toward developing the Kawa model. So what I realized was that occupational therapy models were actually cultural artifacts. They resemble and reflect the values and the worldviews and the interpretations of truth and reality of the very people who are actually constructing the model or deriving the theory. And so you can just imagine what this is like when, this is where models come from. People sit down, they may not even have to be in the ivory tower. and they'll say, okay, let's take a look at the concept of occupation. How do we explain all of these ideas and what we know about occupation in a simpler way, in a systematic way? And so we begin to sit down and agree upon certain concepts. In fact, some theorists don't even work with others. They just sit down and hammer out their ideas and put them down in a systematic form, literally. Usually, like it would look like boxes that are arranged in a linear fashion: A plus B plus C equals D. And then the person might go on to then publish that idea and share it with a whole bunch of other people. Other people then may encounter it and think, oh, this is really good. This is very useful. It helps me to explain my practice. It helps me to describe accurately what it is that I'm doing in my occupational therapy. It's helping me to predict outcomes with my patient or client. It's doing all of the things that we attribute to good theory and good models. The phenomena in Japan was that here, Japan now has over 180 schools of occupational therapy. And can you imagine the thousands of OTs that are graduating every year without really understanding in any kind of real way the concept of occupation, the core concept of their profession? The Japanese don't even have a word or a concept in their lexicon, in their language, that actually explains or mirrors what we have come to understand about occupation. So I'm talking about the cultural dilemmas that occur when we take ideas and experiences in one cultural realm and then take them across cultural boundaries of meaning and commit the mistake of foisting those ideas and interpretations of reality onto people who abide in a very different constellation of experiences, of reality, of culture. Okay? So while I'm on this tangent, I'm going to just continue, okay? Because this is, I hope that is helpful, especially to students of occupational therapy. We want to be able to understand our models and to be able to critique them and to be able to make good decisions about when we use models and portions of models and assessments with our clients. Well, I just have to remember where I was because I was so far off on a different tangent. I think I was talking about culture and about theory and construction of theory.
And trying to apply sort of Western models to
Right.
a different,
Yes.
culture.
Okay. All right. A sociologist would say that in general, in terms of the large changes that we're seeing in society, we have come through a period of time that has been described by social scientists as the modern age. This sort of follows the Enlightenment of the 1700s, the birth of rational thinking, the growth of a sense of this idea that the world and everything within it is made up of understandable parts that are carefully put together as if by design. And that if you want to be able to understand a particular phenomena of interest, it's just a matter of looking at it more closely, breaking it down or reduction down to simpler elements. And there's an assumption that if we can understand the simpler elements, then we can understand the more complex whole. This is also the period of time where, theories and models and these explanations of phenomena actually also emerged, but with a twist. And that is that these models that we developed were just assumed to be universal in their application. So the model maker didn't have a sense that people actually see the world and reality in unique and different ways. There was just an assumption that my view of reality should be everybody else's view of reality. So if I develop a model or some instructions or a recipe for how things should be done, then, and if it's a good one and it's been tested and on a population and it looks like it's viable, 95%, the p-values are where they should be, then gosh, you've got something that is a theory and is good for everyone everywhere. Our models in occupational therapy, and I have to really laud our theorists in OT, because we have been the front runners in the rehabilitation sciences and in the health professions to actually develop models. And it was in the 1970s and 1980s that many of the models that we still lean on today were actually born. And they were made by humans like you and me, cloistered in their particular location, their own cultural location. But we made models during that period of time that were assumed to be universal in their application. And so if you took one of our OT models or contemporary OT models and took them to a very different cultural location, and if the people there couldn't quite make sense of it, you might just sort of say, well, you need to just study this a little bit more because it really works. When I was in Japan, I realized that, oh my goodness, these ideas are culturally bound and culturally located. And most importantly, it's not just that the therapists and the students of OT couldn't understand this, it was incomprehensible by our clients. So how is it that we take our clients and patients down a pathway that they might not necessarily understand, and even you as the therapist might not even understand, but just believe that it's right because, hey, these are ideas that are venerated in my profession. And because this famous teacher or that famous professor developed it, it has to be right and it has to be good. Models are really good when they work with a population that can relate to its concepts and its principles in the way that the model has laid it out. So we talk about the modern age, and now there are many social scientists who would say that we are now in the postmodern age. And this postmodern age is actually accelerated by advances in digital technology and in the proliferation of social media. Now think about it. Back in the old days, if you wanted to converse with somebody far away who might have a very different view of an object or of a phenomena of interest, you'd have to get on a ship or on an airplane and travel for hours and hours in order to go and have that kind of interaction, or to have this interaction and exchange of ideas through snail mail, writing to your pen pal and waiting for several weeks for their response to come back. Whereas now, you can just get on your phone and you can have a conversation in real time with somebody in Australia or in Africa, wherever that is. And you can have arguments about whether abortion is right or wrong, or whether the death penalty is right or wrong, or whether a conservative view of politics is the right one compared to a liberal view. On and on it goes. But if we take the assumption that everybody develops their own particular unique view of reality, gains a sense of what is normal, understands what is morally right and morally wrong, what is safe, what is not safe, what is dangerous, then we'll realize that we need a different kind of model, one that actually tries to minimize or eliminate this problem of taking ideas, modernist ideas, applying them into postmodern conditions of different cultural spheres of understanding and knowing. Okay, so I realized, oh my goodness, it's not that the Japanese OTs don't get models because they're not intelligent enough or that they haven't studied enough. No, fundamentally, we needed to reconstruct and reconfigure occupational therapy so that it could be understandable and valued by the very population that we are trying to serve. And I realized at the time that if you want to eliminate the problem of culture, of one culture colonizing another, or oppressing another, or just taking confounding ideas and trying to get the other to accept them as their reality. If we want to solve that problem, one way is to make it all about the client and the client's view and understanding of their reality and their day-to-day circumstances. Okay, so instead of taking ideas from North America that are about normal function and normal performance in everyday life and activities, and then imposing those as a standard for Japanese students or clients and patients to be able to meet. If we were to actually develop a method that would get at the actual person's model or theory of or explanation of what their experience of everyday life is like and what kinds of problems they're facing, all in the context of their world of meanings, then we can get closer to delivering or at least offering an occupational therapy that is relevant to their needs and powerful in its ability to help to heal and help to recover. So you'll see that really the Kawa model really differs from many other models in that instead of taking concepts and using those as a lens to interpret the client's performance in everyday life, it actually turns that around, turns it right on its head and says, you know what, the key to powerful occupational therapy is to actually first and foremost experience. What is it like for an elderly person who's just on the cusp of dementia? What does the world look like from that viewpoint? And what about that person's loved ones? How do they also make sense of and try to appreciate what is happening to their family member? And can occupational therapy be delivered in a way that is just much more powerful and relevant? So you'll see that the Kawa model actually is about getting to the client's narrative, getting to their view. It's about empathy. It's about how is it that we can better imagine what this person is going through and what their issues are. It uses a metaphor. And a metaphor, why a metaphor? Well, if you believe that everybody has a slightly different or very, very different view of reality, you want to be able to find some common understanding, a language, a language that you and your client can actually mutually understand and use. And so that's what the river metaphor is about. It's a vehicle of communication. Okay? And this is why the Kawa model doesn't work with everybody. It's like a metaphor is kind of like a joke that a comedian tells. If you're in front of an audience and your experiences and views of everyday life are similar to others that are in your audience, then the joke is going to be met with applause and laughter. But if you now take that same joke and you take it to people who abide in a very different experience of life and that they've learned the world and they've learned normal in a very different way, you'll tell your joke and it'll be met with silence and maybe some faces full of consternation, right? So here we are with metaphors. And the last thing that I'll say about metaphors is this, is that if you were to record a conversation with your friend or a colleague, let's say over a period of a minute or 2 minutes, and you were able to transcribe exactly what you said to one another, you would be astonished at the amount of metaphor that we rely upon to communicate. We're actually relating to each other through these common symbols, these common concepts that don't need to be explained. When a patient comes up to you and says, "Oh, my back pain, it hurts like a knife," and you know, and if you know what a knife is, and you can imagine what that might feel like if you were being impaled with one, then yes, you can kind of relate to what the client is saying, what your patient is saying. Okay, so that is why this model differs. The Kawa model differs in that it actually relies upon the client um, to bring forward their narrative. And instead of occupational therapy barreling into a person's life and saying, we're going to do this, 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 and this, because according to the model that I'm following, this is the right thing. And I've been trained at the uni. So I know your reality better than you know it yourself. And I'm going to explain it to you. All right. I'm saying things in kind of dramatic and extreme kind of way. Maybe it's kind of helpful to understand what I'm trying to say and where I'm coming from. So, you know, it's really about appreciating the client's model, the client's story, through a common metaphor that allows you to be able to gain as much understanding and empathy as you can. All right. And then instead of occupational therapy barreling in with our imperatives, we actually take time to appreciate that model that is before us, that narrative, and then together with the client to be able to think about what occupational therapy has to offer. What are the really important things in the client's life in terms of daily life performance that they would like to really get better with? And you can then think about, well, what kind of things can I think of in occupational therapy? What activities can I put together to help this person move toward their potential? Okay. So I can't even remember what the original question was, but hopefully in this long-winded answer to it, I've also maybe answered some of the other questions that were on the list to be asked.
Yeah, you certainly have, and I think it's such a buzzword in occupational therapy, and it's something that's very important. Is that concept of client-centered practice, and that's what you've boiled it down to in the long and short of it is what's important to the person that you're trying to help, and
Yes.
how can we use their knowledge of their life is going to be any greater than anything we know. How can we use that knowledge to help them? Brilliant, thank you so much. Yeah, you have answered several of the questions.
Well, and let me just go on just to add to that. It will also not only highlight, you know, those really important elements in a person's life, but it will also uncover where the gaps are and where you might be able to come as an occupational therapist and be able to say, you know what, I noticed that there is this also happening, and what do you think about, you know, us doing this particular treatment or this particular activity to also work on those. I mean, it's also, the Kawa model is also a vehicle to highlight and emerge epiphanies, things that maybe were not realized before or were not even listed in the medical chart. Okay, sorry to interrupt you, Will. Okay.
No, not at all. No one's come here necessarily to listen to me. The reason we've got so many participants is because they wanted to hear from you. So it's amazing to hear you speak so passionately and yeah, and present yourself in such an enthusiastic way. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I have other questions. We have a few, quite a few other questions. So I guess one that one of the Laura, one of our committee members, the vice president, has asked is what inspired you to complete your further studies, your doctorates in sociology and medical anthropology, and how do you think they enrich practice? Because it's something that we talk about quite a lot in our university is that variety of practice and learning from other fields.
Yes. You know, what I just absolutely love about our profession, about occupational therapy, you know, why I believe that this is the greatest profession in health, is that we are concerned about everyday experience and everyday reality um, of our clients and of others in general. We bring a very holistic and empathetic view to the world. And you know, it was, as I mentioned in my long answer to the first question, is that you know, very early on I realized that, you know, occupational therapy, back in its days in which it was founded, you know, we have really been steered away from our original mandate by biomedicine, and you know what has emerged in the modern age, right? I mean, the latter parts of the modern age. And so uh, I realized that, you know, we are actually not delivering to society our full potential and our full offerings, because we have been blindsided, or maybe perhaps even indoctrinated into interpreting people's issues, health issues, as embodiments. You know, the problem, when you go to a hospital with a problem, with a health issue, one of the first questions is, well, where is the problem? You know, where in your body or in your head, you know, is the problem, and what's the quality of it? And then we'll give you a diagnosis to validate it. And then unless we do that, occupational therapy or physiotherapy or anything else can't start, right? So I realized that we were not even scratching, even our models that we were learning, we were paying homage to the environment, and that how we needed occupation as a bridge between the self and the environment. Uh, you know, we were talking all about the self, all about the individual. All of our models, except for the Kawa model, has had a concept to describe or to place the individual or the self. You know, the environment and the self are two separate, distinct entities that rely upon occupational therapy to bridge the two and to bring them together. And if that association is not going very well, the interaction between the self and the environment, then there's a need for OT, right? And by the way, I'm just going to go off on just one tangent just to enlighten everybody about this. When you go to other places apart from the Western world, you're going to encounter a different worldview, one in which the self and the environment are not distinctly separated, okay? One in which the two are one. And so when you go to teach the definition of occupation as Westerners have constructed it, in a place like Japan that sees the world in this kind of way, the self and the environment as being inseparably united and always in flux, that's what impermanence is all about, then they're going to ask you, what is the value and the meaning of occupation as our Western OT brothers and sisters have articulated it? What is the instrumental value of it if the self and the environment are united and inseparably so? You know, we can see that occupation is needed when the self is constructed as a distinct entity and the environment is constructed as a distinct entity, right? And you need occupation. You can reconcile the concept, but for people who have a fundamentally different view of reality, who actually see it this way. In fact, it was my Japanese students who actually raised their hand and said, if I am in the environment as the environment is within me, why do I need this thing that you call occupation? Okay, so I went off on that tangent, and I was talking about this is what happens when you get old.
No, you're sort of talking about how occupational therapy can use other. Well, I asked you about
Right,
why you
right,
completed your
right.
doctorates.
Yes. So, well, what a tangent I went on.
No,
Uh,
that's fine.
I hope you found that interesting.
Yeah,
So, very early on, I realized that that we were compromised in our understanding and knowledge about the environment and our interactions with it, the social and the physical environment. I think that we've gravitated toward the physical environment, but I really realized that, you know, if we want to be in the business of helping people to become well, to experience well-being, we better have knowledge and expertise and an understanding of the social. So that is why I really believe that um, as we go forward as a profession, that it's really, really important to be able to really appreciate the value of um, prior study in the humanities, the social sciences, um, the I don't know whether if in the UK you call this the liberal arts, but you know you want to just fortify your understanding of the world as much as possible. You know, you want to be able to understand poetry. You want to be able to understand you know, symbolic interaction. You want to be able to understand what adaptation is all about. You know, it's not just about the machinery and fixing the machinery. So you know, it is from those curiosities, and it also helped that when I was doing a master's degree in rehabilitation sciences, I was actually working on a quantitative research question. But I happened to have a couple of psychologists on my committee, and um, and that just, you know, just affirmed for me the need for me to really follow my passion, and that is to I took an interest in the social. I took an interest in what is it that makes all of us unique and different, and I just thought that this would be a, you know, it would also make a contribution to the field of occupational therapy. So we
yeah,
need people with backgrounds in medicine and medical science, as well as from the social sciences, the humanities, and so on and so forth. I don't know
yeah,
how many people in the audience here are musicians and play instruments, or are artists and paint and draw and love to do those kinds of creative things. Um, I just want to shout out to all of you that have that and have been daunted by coming into a world of study that seems to favor reductionistic, um, uh, scientific approaches. And you know, we also hear it indirectly when people begin to demand that our practice needs to be based on evidence-based, you know, knowledge, uh, and but they don't quite say what kind of evidence is is really required. And I think that that evidence should be very, very broad, and it should also bring in the 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 plethora, the constellation of knowledge that is on the social side of our experience.
yeah, yeah. I completely agree. Growing up in a similar environment where, yeah, the biomedical framework is something that's always been what's wrong with you, and okay, here's your answer. It's never how are you, which are very different questions, you know.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that's yeah, yeah, fascinating concept that you've sort of given to me. I haven't really considered that too much
Yes.
before, and
Yeah,
yeah,
and I really believe that we shouldn't you know, gravitate so much toward the I'm just, for lack of better words, the physical. We want to be open and client centered enough to also appreciate the spiritual dimension as well. So, and that will come out if you give people the opportunity to, through the metaphor of a river, or the motorway, or the, whatever it is, whatever metaphor that they use, to be able to convey those things, and that we should not dismiss it as being not worthy of focus because it's unscientific. It's about their experience and their wellness of everyday life that is sacred to the occupational therapist. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, one of the questions that I had, you've touched upon it briefly. You sort of said earlier, the Kawa model might not be for every single client. And that's something that I was wondering, especially in this country, we can be, I know it's a stereotype, but some people said it exists for a reason. We can be a little bit, I don't know, maybe a bit serious, or a little bit, that stiff upper lip concept. How would you approach someone that didn't warm so much to the idea of applying their life to a metaphor and a river? And yeah, how would you get around that?
One of the things that we want to realize is that we are, in modern language, professionals. And one of the factors that delineates us or differentiates us from technicians is that technicians will basically execute their services in a very organized and predetermined kind of way. They follow recipes. They follow step one, undo this nut. Step two, turn this screw. Step three, remove this item. Step, you know what I mean?
Yeah, discreet. Yeah.
Professionals are people who actually look at a problem or an issue and are able to make decisions about what approaches, what techniques, what steps would apply and be relevant to this particular problem, to be able to solve it effectively and efficiently. So, when we learn occupational therapy, when we study it, and often when we teach it, it's almost like we rely upon these formulas, these models, to kind of guide and determine and order what we do, our approaches, our intervention. And I think that you, as an occupational therapist, when you study all of these different models and you study the epistemology and the knowledge base, the knowledge systems that inform all kinds of other aspects of your practice and your offerings, is that you should be able to see a client and start to make decisions about which models are relevant and which ones aren't. It's almost like all of this is held in a toolkit bag that you take into the field. And depending on the situation, you're going to pull out of your bag the correct map, okay, that suits the topography, that is going to give you the best chance for you to navigate your way through this terrain. The mistake that we make is that when we rely upon models that are inappropriate, or that the client can't understand, or that we can't even understand, it's like pulling a map out of your kit bag that let's say that you're trying to navigate the London tube system, and here you have a map of the Boston mass transit system. The colors and the lines all look kind of similar, but if you follow the wrong map, you're going to get lost. It's kind of like a dog wagging its tail. So many therapists are being wagged by the models and the theories and assessments and things that we've learned. We want to be able to put emphasis at the front end to be able to say, no, we want to choose the right process, model, framework, whatever it is. And this is why my hat is off to veteran occupational therapists. They've attained a very high skill level of being able to actually exercise their own theory forged over time to be able to say, in this situation with a client that is of this age and is struggling with these kinds of issues, I think the best approach is to take the model of human occupation and this part of it and introduce that first, and then go to this other model and then implement the principles of that model next. Okay, so what I'm saying is that if the Kawa model is not good, if the client can't relate to it and can't use it, doesn't like it, by all means throw it away, just put it aside and choose another approach that is much more safe for your client. Okay, now while I say that, I'll just also say that the Kawa model only works successfully when the process of building trust with your client evolves. And so when people first describe their initial rivers, there are probably a lot of things that they either don't want to divulge to you because they don't trust you that much yet, or that they're not even aware of it being a problem. And it's almost like the river is shrouded in a fog. And as you develop your rapport, as you take a greater interest in what that person's actual experience is like of everyday life, you'll find that if you endeavor to do that, that the trust bond will grow, and that the river, in this case, will become much more clear in terms of the elements that are there. Okay, so the Kawa model, I want to say very clearly, is not a modernist framework. It is not a grand theory. From the very beginning, this is what I've wanted to impress upon everybody encountering it. Don't treat the Kawa model like the other models that we maybe have become familiar with. These are not hard and fast rules. It's not universal. So don't think that there is a correct way to use and apply the Kawa model. It's a tool that's out there. You're the dog. It is a tail that you should have the freedom to be able to wag in its most appropriate way. And so, yeah, choose appropriate models. And with the Kawa model, there is no correct way to be able to apply it. We can give you examples of it. Some people will use it just simply as a mental framework to make sure that they're viewing the client holistically, and they're really thinking about the environment and other circumstances, trying to get to their view of normal or reality, I should say. Yeah, I'm going all of these different directions because the will that I have within me is to be able to try to make this time together as rich and as fruitful as can possibly make it, because I don't have a lot of opportunity to be able to always come and be able to have these kinds of exchanges. So
Yeah.
yeah. All
And
right.
yes, yeah, again, thank you so much. And it's really, yeah, it's really sort of altering my concepts of things. Again, like I said, growing up in a fairly biomedical kind of framework, thinking of that, really putting the person in the middle, the client in the middle is super, super important. And actually, the next question I was going to ask you was, the Kawa model requires a lot of self-disclosure, but you already went into that. How do you go about applying that with someone who's more closed? But it's about that therapeutic relationship, isn't it, and building that trust.
Yeah, it is. And Will, if I can just take your question a little bit further and be able to also answer a question that is commonly asked to me, and that is how the Kawa model probably doesn't work with children, with people with profound intellectual issues, What about elderly people with dementia? You know, how do you expect them to draw a picture of a river and have insight into their situations? What about people with schizophrenia, or experiencing schizophrenia, or experiencing depression, or a bipolar condition? And so I just think, well, this is the reason why I go on a tirade about how we should not use the Kawa model like a modernist framework, a grand theory. We want to uh, uh, be able to get to the information that we want as best as we can. So if the person can't articulate their issues, then can we expand our definition of the client to also include that person's family or partner, loved ones, people who have that person's interest at heart? And then to be able to use a framework like the Kawa model to imagine how grandpa's river is flowing and what his rocks might be and how big they might be, and what the social and physical environment might be like, and what kind of a constraint or thickening of the river walls is that creating. And to then be able to collectively put our minds together and with an attitude of love to be able to say, how can we make this rock a little bit smaller? How can we expand the river banks a little bit more? Yeah, we place so much emphasis on independence and autonomy, but we unwittingly also require the person to have a very high level of insight and knowledge. Um, yeah, we often do this unwittingly. So, you know, I think that if you've heard anything from me, it is that if you are working with a client and you're trying to use the Kawa model and you find that you need to adapt it in some kind of way or change it, this is if you have decided not to just put it aside. Um, the green light is on. You're hearing it from the horse's mouth. From the very beginning, the Kawa model has sort of been grown in the spirit of open source software, that meant to be a gift from an occupational therapist to other occupational therapists. And so if you can find a way that is going to be much safer for your client to be able to use, um, whatever it is, if you can improve upon it, change it, by all means, go ahead and do it. And you might call it your variation of it for that particular situation, the Hannah Louise Toomey version of the Kawa model. Okay, so yeah, so what I'm saying is that uh, feel free to make the changes. What I want to say is love and honor your client, and let that guide the decisions that you make about what kind of a framework you're going to use, and whether you're going to use the Kawa model or not, or whether you're going to adapt and change it. The end goal is that we're trying to fulfill our promise of trying to enable people from all walks of life to be able to engage and participate in activities and processes that have value and meaning in their lives, right? So, but I'll go on to say that from the very beginning, I have vowed not to make a penny of profit from the Kawa model. And that is why people are astounded when they hear that when I am invited to speak about the Kawa model, as long as it's a not-for-profit event, then I don't charge a speaking fee at all. And it's in that spirit. I don't want people to monetize the Kawa model. I've never wanted to build an empire around it. And this is another reason why, apart from the fact that it's not a grand theory, it's not a modernist framework, that I haven't developed a whole slew of standardized tests to go with the Kawa model. So so I want people to know that, so that when you go about adapting the Kawa model, um, the light is red with regard to marketing your variation and making loads of money off of it. Um, Keep it within the spirit of paying things forward, so to speak, and we'll find that the model will continue to grow and change, and you'll start to see variations uh, in Saudi Arabia, in the UK in terms of how it's used, the various ways in which it's used, and so on and so forth. I mentioned at the very beginning that our greatest theorists in our profession are practitioners of occupational therapy. And we want to be able to evolve our ideas in a way that will really, really help and support a much more effective and especially socially just practice.
Wow, that's so commendable, and yeah, really, really grateful that you've sort of essentially given away your knowledge and experience for not for individual gains. So yeah, brilliant, fantastic. What,
You
what
know,
more can I say?
the satisfaction that I get vicariously is that I know that the Kawa model will deliver a much more just and helpful occupational therapy. And and to think that people all over the world are discovering the model and actually using it to help people, to help people. It's just, I can't describe the sense of satisfaction and fulfillment that comes to me. And that is more than enough pay or profit. I want to be able to die with a smile on my face, and this is one of the ways that's going to help me to get there. It's not about you can make however millions of pounds on some kind of invention, but at the end of the day, when your river flows into the vast ocean, um, you can't take any of that stuff with you.
Mm.
But what remains is a legacy of having affected people in positive, helpful, and healing ways. So there you go. You're probably getting more than you ever thought you would about the Kawa model. It's yeah, I'm being open and honest about it with you, and so yeah, um, uh, use it if it will help, and especially if it will help your client.
Yeah, I know the teaching that we had on it. I just remember certainly everyone wearing masks and being in a classroom with our lecturer, but just when we engaged, it's just so easy to engage with, and like you said, it's metaphorical, and it just makes sense, I suppose, and it's just very engaging, and it's a very easy way to put aside your problems and put aside the things that are going well, and say, okay, this is what can change, and it just breaks things down so simply. And yeah, I really loved the lecture that we had when we spoke about the Kawa model.
I'm so glad to hear about how the Kawa model is being taught in your program at Oxford Brookes.
Mm-hmm.
And but I really what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. Um, I think back to the days in which the Kawa model was actually being put together, and I had assembled. I had actually when I went to work in Japan, the OTs, the OT world in Japan treated me like I was like the Messiah. And, and I say this kind of jokingly, not to brag at all, not at all. And that was because here were thousands of Japanese occupational therapists who were yearning to understand occupational therapy theory. And now here was this man who had Japanese DNA, could speak Japanese, um, worked as an occupational therapist in North America, and also taught theory at the university. um, this person's going to come and going to solve all of our frustrations. We're finally going to understand the core concept of our profession. And I ran a number of workshops nationally, and I could tell from the first or second hour of those workshops that there was a huge problem. And that, here I was teaching actually the model of human occupation. And I took what would be a 2 hour, 2.5 hour lecture, and I would spread it out over a 2.5 day workshop, thinking that if I could just explain things slowly and in Japanese, everybody would get it and everybody would be happy. Well, there were people who were dejected. And, these are people who were all so disillusioned that they were ready to just leave the profession
Wow.
and, go and work at Sainsbury's. What's the name of the grocery store there? No.
In
Anyway,
here,
yeah.
yeah, you got it right. Yeah, yeah, Sainsbury's. Yeah.
What's the other one?
Oh,
The
there's a lot.
other big rival that's green and white.
Asda. It's owned by
Yeah,
Walmart.
Asda. Okay. Yeah, they were going to leave the profession and go and work as work the cash registers, because at least that was something that they could understand, and that could be seen as being helpful. And here they were, just really, really disillusioned. And it's those people that I gathered, and I said, you know what? It's just dawned on me that we need to develop a whole new framework. The Western OTs have had the luxury, the privilege of being able to develop their theory from the ground up, based on their views of reality and experiences of everyday life. And this is a fundamental problem of taking ideas and views of narratives of reality, and then imposing those upon, in this case, Japanese OTs. And um, once we started on that whole process of developing the Kawa model, we would have focus groups on a weekly basis in the evenings at various universities in the region. We were borrowing classrooms, and we had students, OT students, we had OT practitioners in pediatrics, mental health, and adult physical rehabilitation, so on and so forth. We had teachers, we had a few teachers, and we also had some clients of occupational therapy.
Mm.
And we started at the very beginning by asking the fundamental questions: what is the meaning of health? What is it? What does it mean to be well, from a Japanese experience? What is the definition of, how do you define disability? How do you define illness? And from there, we were able to then, at the time, I was thinking with the Western part of my brain, and I was imploring everybody that at the end of the day, when we develop a new model, it has to be um, made up of boxes connected together with plus signs, with an equal sign at the end and another big box on the end. And it has to be in a linear fashion: A plus B plus C equals D. And what came back was a circle with 4 boxes in the middle, and the boxes were connected by arrows going in every direction, one box being connected to all of the other 3 boxes in the circle. And that this was described as being kind of like an amoeba, always in flux, always changing, meaning that our experiences of everyday life and our outlook on things differs from moment to moment to moment. And so it's kind of like a river. If you take a cross section of the river at any point along its path, you'll see some familiar elements that are always there, like the rocks and the driftwood and the river walls and sides. But the configuration is always going to differ from moment to moment to moment. It's like a stick of sausage, right? The Kawa model can also be the sausage model. When I go to Germany, this is how I often explain it. It's kind of like a wurst.
Yeah.
And if you cut the wurst at any point along its length, it's going to yield a similar picture. The different elements of the bits of fat and the bits of mystery meat and the bits of this and that, ligament and whatever it is that goes into a sausage, it's going to be similar, but it's actually going to be different at every cut along the way. Our lives as human beings can also be described in a similar type of way. It's changing from moment to moment to moment. And with our clients, we are afforded the privilege of being able to come into their lives and to be able to see what that moment in time actually looks like through their eyes and through their experience, through their words. And then to be able to then be in a really wonderful position to be able to say, oh, I think I can help with that. Oh, I think I can help with this. I think that there's a solution for this particular issue. And to have that helpful conversation with our clients to then be able to cobble together some tangible objectives and goals, and then to also determine what would be the most appropriate intervention to be able to get the river to where the client would like it to, how the client would like it to flow. Okay, I hope that I'm still staying relevant and that you're gaining more and more insight. And the reason why this is really important is that, as I said, models don't descend from heaven. And you want to make good decisions about which models you choose and which models you put to the side and which ones you need to adapt. And in order to do that, you have to have a very thorough understanding of the actual map that you are studying and have acquired. Okay?
Yeah.
So that you can make the best decisions about what to do in the field.
Fantastic. I don't know if you've been seeing any of the comments that people have been writing. There's about 60 or so. But I think you're really reaching some people, and people getting a little bit emotional, I think. So yeah, it's great to see a few of our practitioners and teachers as well.
Yeah. You know, you can probably tell from what I've just shared with you all that the Kawa model has always been controversial to a number of people. Some people won't even look at it because they just think it's child's play. You know, it's not as serious as all of the other models that we have, and there aren't any standardized instruments that have been created, you know, to go with it. How can we take anything like that seriously? It's unscientific, and so on and so forth. Well, you know, I will give you another insight into the Kawa model. If you use it well, one way that you can use it well is that it's going to inform you as to which standardized instruments you will want to consult and apply in your situation. If you have a person who has a river that is blocked up with all kinds of rocks to the point where the water is barely flowing, and in your conversations with that person, they're constantly in tears and can barely answer the questions that you're putting to them. You might think, oh my goodness, I think this person has depression. And so that may then prompt you to ask for a referral to a psychiatrist or to a psychologist to be able to explore that further. Or you might take a standardized instrument, with a gold standard instrument like the Beck Depression Inventory, and initially use that as a screen to find out what kinds of things are going on. So the Kawa model is almost like, I don't use Twitter, but I often imagine that Twitter is often used to point people to information and so on and so forth. Well, the Kawa model can also inform you as to those features, those areas that you want to investigate further and validate further. So if one of the rocks that the client explains is you know, decreased ability, the person's having difficulties in working in their own kitchen and putting their glasses back onto the shelf, or to, you know, use the frying pan in a certain kind of way, you might think, okay, well, we want to understand this a little bit further. Let's use FIMS, or let's use amps, or let's use another instrument that is specifically meant for the investigation of this kind of function. So I think that you'll be able to see, if you really learn the Kawa model well, you'll see that it's a very powerful instrument in being able to really point out where you need to have more information and where you need to investigate things more in order then to inform a much more meaningful and just intervention.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, of course, it makes perfect sense that that's how you could see it, and it's a really easy way of interpreting and allowing yourself to find something useful in terms of an actual standardized assessment. So just, I guess we've got about 9 or 10 minutes left. I don't know. Unfortunately, about 20 minutes into the call, my laptop disconnected from the Wi-Fi. We were going to pose questions to the chat and ask if anyone had any questions. I'm not sure if I'm able to see the chat very easily. We don't have loads of time left, so I don't know if people want to take a photo of if Hannah Louise said she might take a photo, and I've got sort of maybe 1 or 2 more questions that we might be able to touch upon in the next few minutes. So I guess one of the things is what would be a real, I mean, we've spoken about it at length, obviously, what you can be what you can get from the Kawa model and how it can help you with your practice. But what would be one sort of important takeaway from the Kawa model that you'd like to give to people and let them go away with?
Yeah, this is something that I really always try to do with every talk that I give about the Kawa model. And that is this: if there's one important takeaway or lesson that I would like you to learn about the Kawa model, if there's one thing that I want you to understand about the Kawa model, here it is. That is, imagine your client to be the theorist who develops a model that explains their experience of everyday life. And you, as the therapist, as the occupational therapist, becomes a student of that theorist's model, asking probing questions like, why is this rock this big? Why are there so many rocks here? Oh, I thought that maybe one of your driftwood would be this, but can you explain this further? Or tell me a little bit more about your social environment, your friends, your family, okay? And through this back and forth, you're able to get a clear understanding and picture of, you're able to get a much more, a greater understanding of the theorist's model, right? And that I believe is a really good starting point or way to look at this. And the wonderful thing about this process is that it leads to you and the theorist working together to try to find ways to allow this river to flow better, to flow much more strongly and beautifully. So that's the lesson about the Kawa model. And, always remember that it is just a tool, it's an instrument. And maybe the other thing that I'll just add, because I realize that we've got a limited amount of time, that is that it's just a metaphor. It's just a metaphor. And really, the power of it is really how the metaphor is used and employed. So if the river metaphor doesn't work for the person, then the person has a different metaphor that you and the client can relate to. Use that instead. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Really, the goal is that you want to help your client. So like in Germany, I've had OT students who actually, have defied my instructions of, drawing a river. And, some cheeky person will come forward and say, oh, I kind of changed things. And this is the picture of the Autobahn. And, this is what my life, I can relate to this much better because this is a highway without any speed limits. And there are on ramps and off ramps, and there are crashes, and there are traffic jams and slowdowns. And with times when you have to take an alternate route to get to where you need to go, yeah, okay, well, there it is. That theorist has just built a model and is now giving you the greatest uh, invitation or inroad into having that person explain even much more in an understandable way as to how what their daily life experience is like and how it's going and how it's flowing. Right? Some people might use a tree. Oh, and one other thing that I want to tell you is this. I mentioned earlier that there is no correct way for applying the Kawa model, right? Um, and so, uh, gosh, what was I going to say? Um, uh, yeah, yes, okay, here it is. Uh, if your client begins to draw their river, or maybe this is about the third or fourth session that you've had with them, and they're, whatever it is, if they start drawing things that are not driftwood and rocks, but they're just things like fish and eels and bones and skulls and burning houses and twisted bicycles or whatever it is, don't stop the person and say, hey, that's not one of the concepts. We didn't agree upon that, and we would certainly feel that way if this was a universal model and we had to stay within the concepts and exercise the principles in the correct way. No, what you're being given is a real gift. The magic of the Kawa model is not in how you follow, its protocol, but rather in the client's explanation of their model. You're going to ask, why is this house burning here? They may tell you, well, ever since the fire that destroyed my house, my life has just been a wreck. And I would have been able to handle a lot of these other rocks that are downriver from there much better. But, I experienced 60% burns over my body, and I've lost the function of my left arm. Okay. So, um, um, encourage it,
Mhm.
and it doesn't have to be a drawing. It can be materials that are arranged on the floor, or I know therapists in places like Australia who work with Aborigine adolescent in adolescent psychiatry service. And that therapist for years has now just been taking a tray full of objects that she can gather together, be it peppermint candy sticks to balls of tissue paper to whatever it is, whatever she's got that day, and she'll bring it into the middle of the room, plop it down on the floor, and tell everybody, okay, I want everybody now to take these materials and make a river and something that reflects how you're feeling right now, right? And it invites then conversations around, well, how can we get this to go better for you? How can we eliminate these eels and these snakes that are in your river? Um, uh, so it is it is meant to be this flexible.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, it's about your client, right? It's about your client, and it's about their narrative and how you can get to that as closely as you can. Um, One last thing that I'll mention too, just because I want to, is that the Kawa model is used in different ways in different countries. So when you think about, for example, um, uh, Japan, where the society is arranged in groups, and then in each group there is a rigid hierarchy. It's part of the Confucian ethic and how it's interpreted in Japan. The therapist is always at a much higher rung in the status ladder than the patient. And so it's very difficult to get the patient to actually initiate and to express what they're feeling and what their experience of everyday life is like, because they're wondering what the correct answer is and what it is that this venerated person wants to hear. So in Japan, in most cases, it's the therapist who comes to the intake meeting, the first meeting, with a river that's already been drawn. And the person might say, Mr. Tanaka, I took the liberty of looking through your medical chart, and I thought about how things must be for you on a daily basis in the picture of a river. Can I show it to you? And can I explain what I've drawn? And in that conversation, the person will say, no, that rock isn't that big, and you've actually missed another rock, which is this, or what, right? That's Japan. In Spain, it's almost always that the client and the therapist actually draw or paint or configure a river together. In the United States, where independence is declared, the individual is at the center of the universe. You'll often see that depicted in occupational therapy models when you see that the concept for the self is actually in the center of the universe and everything revolves around me, me, me. There's a propensity for people to take the Kawa model and to actually draw themselves as a figure, as a concept in the river. So whether the person's surfing or on a boat or on a paddleboard or whatever it is, or a canoe, that's kind of, there's a tendency to want to go that way. There is no correct way to use the Kawa model. But what you want to do is you want to be able to know what benefit it's going to be. What information is it that you're going to get or that you want to get from using the model or a variation of it? It's really about trying to understand, trying to value the client's view of everyday reality. It's their narrative. Okay.
Yeah.
And I just want people to know that I've got a time. If there are some people who've got to go at whatever the time is, that's that. But if there are some people who really have a question out there that they're just really we're hoping that I would address. I'm just wondering if it's okay with you folks if we can go
Absolutely.
a little bit over time.
Yeah, for sure. There was one question that I thought was quite interesting in the chat, which was about the locus of control. Let me just find it now, sorry. Yes, it says, please could you possibly get into the locus of control in the Kawa model, explain sort of what that means and what that's about.
Yeah, I remember just back in the old days, and now I'm just reminiscing, 25, 30 years ago, when I was teaching the first rendition of the model of human occupation. The idea of locus of control was, at least at that time, a really important facet of the model of human occupation, of MOHO. And it was that ideally, we wanted to see the locus of control within the person. And the farther the locus of control departed from and came away from the self and moved more and more toward the environment, so that one's circumstances are controlling your everyday life and circumstances. That was seen to be as another definition of disability and the need for occupational therapy. So there was an assumption that the locus of control had to be in a healthy and well individual, in an adaptive person, that the locus of control would be here. Humans would be agent. We would be able to decide on the activities and tasks that we wanted, that I wanted to do, and that my ability to effect control on the environment was an indication of my wellness. And more, as I lost my ability to control my circumstances and have the environment and its conditions begin to control me more, that was not just a state of disability, but it was also the need, a flag that pointed to the need for occupational therapy intervention. Now, when you think about this and you analyze it from a different level, from a 30,000-foot view level, you'll see that it is really based upon an individual-centric view of the world, in which the person, the solitary person, is situated in the center of everything, and that person's doing is really valuable. I found it really interesting way back then that, when I worked with people who had spinal cord injuries, there was a very dangerous time within the first number of weeks of the person incurring the injury, that they were a risk for suicide. And why was that? Well, if you ask the person, they might say, well, I feel this way because all of the things that I want to do in life, I can no longer do. I can't do the things that I want to do. I can't, this is it. I can't even, have a family one day. I can't do this. You know what I mean? It's like you cannot do what you want to do, and that is tragic to people who have learned and abide in a individual centric experience of life. Okay, you contrast that with places like Japan, where the locus of control is actually not so much strongly in the self, but it's actually outside of the self in the groups in which they belong. I wish we had a longer time for me to be able to share some ideas through a lecture on different ways of knowing. These fundamental views of nature and the world that really determine how we then view the world and how we make sense of processes like occupational therapy. But however, lacking that, I'll just tell you that in Japan, we don't, even in our language, we don't say the word I or me very much. Because we see ourselves as inseparably connected to the universe, and that includes the groups and the people to which we belong. And so it's really important to be able to meet the needs of the groups in which we are embedded in and to which we belong. That's what it defines part of what it means for a Japanese person to feel well and to feel healthy. The tragic thing for a patient in Japan is not being able to fulfill their obligations to the people to which they are connected with. And so in terms of locus of control and the Kawa model, what you're trying to do is you're trying to give the locus of control as much as possible to your client. But all the while, the narrative that emerges from that person's kawa or river is going to reflect where the locus of control happens to be. So with Japanese clients or people who belong to indigenous nations, the original peoples of the land, you'll find that they also have a very, very similar view of reality and of the world and of nature. You'll hear people talk about how connected they are to the earth. Well, that's just the window into that worldview. Okay, and you'll see that their locus of control is not necessarily located deeply within the core of the person, but rather it is out there in this amoeba uh, that
Never
is
changing.
constantly flowing, constantly changing, constantly, but in harmony with nature and harmony with the universe. So, what I really want to say to the person who asked this question was that locus of control becomes a very important um, factor and concept in individual centric models, in rational, universal grand theories uh, that concern people and concern the self. The Kawa model kind of almost trivializes issues of locus of control. I shouldn't say trivializes, but it doesn't pay as much attention to it because it is actually a reflection of a different worldview. And instead of trying to impose these concepts onto the client, we're turning it around and we're allowing the client to be the theorist who defines the concepts of interest.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. There's just lots and lots of people saying thank you. Lots of people very grateful that you've taken the time to speak to us today. And so am I, and so are we all in the society. We were so excited, and it's been so fantastic to have you here. There aren't too many more questions in the chat because, to be honest, Michael, I think you've spoken so well. People can't think of what else to ask.
Well, I'm really heartened to know that this session has been recorded, and I hope that it is there first and foremost for the students at Oxford Brookes University from year to year when you are learning about the Kawa model or about theory in occupational therapy, that you'll have this as a resource to at least gain one person's point of view on matters of theory construction and the Kawa model. But I hope that it will also be there as a resource for all of the other institutions that have an occupational therapy program who have an equal yearning to want to know more about the model. So I hope that it's made available as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah, we can put it on YouTube or something if you'd be happy for that to happen.
yes, absolutely. And yeah, that would be really, really great, wouldn't it?
Mm.
But what can I say? I just, it's an honor to be able to speak with all of you and to share this time. I bow my head to those of you who are practitioners and teachers of occupational therapy. And I also honor most of all those who are studying to become occupational therapists. What I want to tell you is that you are the salt of the earth. You are going to be bringing solutions to people who are suffering on a day-to-day basis out there in the world. And so there's a tremendous responsibility that you are now acquiring to be able to go out and to be able to, in your own way, and you are contributing to a better world. You are the next generation of this wonderful and great profession. And so I hope that if there is ever a need among students to want to understand more about this work that I've done, that I'm more than eager to be able to provide that to you as much as I can. It's hard now because the Kawa model is going all over the world, and I mentioned how controversial it is. Well, some people have felt quite threatened. The people who are loyal to another given model in our profession, aren't so used to people like me coming out and saying, there are multiple views of reality, and one model isn't adequate to explain reality, day-to-day reality for everyone everywhere. But people are discovering the Kawa model in different places and in different cultural contexts, and they're finding better ways to be able to serve their clients, their patients, their service users, so to speak. It's kind of pulling me along. There was a day when I was pulling the Kawa model along, trying to get people to understand it. We started in Japan, and it was rejected there initially. People felt threatened by the fact that people at the lowest end of their hierarchy in the OT world had developed theory, something that the venerated professors of occupational therapy had not been able to do over the period of 45 years of the profession being in that country. The Kawa model has met all kinds of adversity along the way. It's been, people have eliminated the Kawa model from certain key textbooks in occupational therapy. And some journals, are reluctant to publish anything on the Kawa. So, but wherever people are discovering it and finding that it's useful, it just continues to grow. And so now it's this monster that is out of the bottle, so to speak. There's no going back.
Response.
Yeah, there's no going back. So I just I hope that it helps you. I hope that it helps you to also form your ideas about occupational therapy. And students, you guys are awesome. Not just guys, sorry. All of you are awesome. You carry the hopes of people like me that have kind of run ahead of you a little bit. But I look forward to the day, and especially now that social media is a thing, it is now a part of our lives, that you will all go on to be the typical human beings that will develop new theory. So maybe the last thing that I will say is this, is that we need as many we need as many models as necessary to be able to deliver a truly just client-centered occupational therapy. And so either make variations on the Kawa model or use it as it is, or combine it with others if you want. You're the one who will make the decisions about that. But also innovate. And in this age of social media, don't worry about getting your ideas out there through the traditional means of, writing for a peer-reviewed journal. I think that if you have something helpful that will be beneficial and helpful to your colleagues, either in your area or around the world, it's worth sharing. And I think that the future of knowledge dissemination sharing, I think, is going to be much more instantaneous and much more accessible. And I think that social media is possibly one of the strongest venues in which that will happen. Okay, so I just want to encourage you all, and I just want to affirm the fact that you're in a wonderful profession. The calling that you've heard on your life and your career is a special one. And I can't wait for you to be able to go out into practice and to experience the deep sense of joy and fulfillment when you give yourself in service to others. All right.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been so wonderful to have you. For those of you who would like to take a photo, or have our committee members take a photo, turn on your cameras. If you don't want to, don't bother, and we'll just take a quick photo, sort of a thumbs up or clap or.
Yeah.
Hold on. Wait. Don't do it just yet. Hold on.
Okay.
1 minute.
Could
I ask everybody not to write in the chat box just for a second, or like maybe 4 or 5? How many pages? 6 seconds. Okay, right. Screenshot on. Okay, first shot now. All right. You're not going to know what page you're on, are you? Because we're all different. Okay, second one. I guess if everyone just waves or something every time I say. Okay, second one now. All right. Oh, shoot. That wasn't meant to happen. Okay. Third. Now. Okay, that's all the pictures I've got. People with their cameras on. That's
Thank you, Henry.
Oh, and by the way, yeah, can I get, you know, how do I get those pictures?
So we can send them to you. I will get a recording, like the recording will save to my drive, and then we can, like, we'll do all the editing and everything. We can send transcript to you, recording to you, pictures to you. They're also, they can be on Twitter as well.
Okay, well, the reason, what I wanted to just say was that, is it okay? I took a picture of one panel that I could see, and I want to be able to put that on my Facebook, and I'm hoping that that will be okay with you all, because I just, you know, and I will say in my comments, come to my Facebook sometime. I don't go on it very much these days because I'm so incredibly busy, but it's just Michael Iwama. You know, and you'll find me, and I think that it's public and everybody will be able to see it, and look for me to put up a posting about our session today. And what else can I say? I hope that you don't mind. I'm just really proud of you all, and I also will acknowledge all of the different programs that had representation today in this wonderful session that was sponsored by Oxford Brookes University and their program in occupational therapy. You guys rock.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. So yeah, I think that's probably all we've got time for. We've only gone over by 22 minutes. So no, it's been brilliant. It's been so brilliant to have you, Michael. Thank you so much for doing this for us. And I know a lot of people have learned a lot and really sort of, I don't know, had their minds blown, if you might.
Well,
too much, but yeah, it's been fantastic.
Let your clients and future clients be your theorists of preference. You're going to learn so much from your interactions with them. That place between you and your clients is a sacred place, and you're going to discover what a privilege it is to be able to be there when people invite you to come into their lives and to understand their narratives of what their experience is. You'll be affirming their necessary existence in our world, and if you can bring something of great value and help to them, it's wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much. I guess we'll just kind of end it there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Oh man, well that's just.
Oh, a couple of us are staying just so we can make sure that we get the recording.
And I'm just staying as long as I can see everybody off.
You don't. Yeah, okay.
Oh, thank you.
I've got the transcript and the chat all okay now.
You've got the chat and the transcript. Perfect. Okay.
All good.
So
Okay.
right.
Yeah. All right. So
Brilliant.
that's it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Oxford Brookes people, thank you so much. This has been really fun for me. And, you know, I think that it's also really enjoyable for me to be able to talk about the Kawa model and to be able to share it in a way that, you know, where I don't have to continually answer the same questions over and over to everybody that wants to know. So I'm really glad that there will be a recording and that people will gain some greater insight into this particular topic.
Yeah,
Okay,
we will share
so-
that with you as soon as it's ready as well.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I want
We'll
to
get Will to email you.
I want to just acknowledge, okay, that it's Hannah Louise and it's Hannah.
Yeah.
Amaka, did I pronounce that correctly? Amaka? Yes, and
Yes,
then
that's correct.
and Abby and Darshani, and we have Lucy here and Jennifer, Nick. Now is that it?
Not all of the OT Society are here, and not all of the people here are the OT
Yeah.
Society committee.
We can send you a list if you'd like of the names of the OT Society who organise the event.
Okay. Now I wonder if for my own benefit, if I can also now take a photograph of of you all.
Cool.
I guess yeah, smile. That's great. I think, yep, that's great. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Okay. All right. Okay. It's been great, and I just say goodbye for now.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Have a lovely day.
Please consider me a good friend of your program at Oxford Brookes.
Yeah.
It would make me really happy if you would.
I
Thank
think
you
it
much. We
feels
definitely
more
do.
like family, to be honest, Michael.
Good. Good. I like that.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a great evening or day time, actually.
Yeah.
Afternoon. All right.
So much.
Goodbye
Take
for
care.
now.
Thank you. Bye bye.